Hey everybody, this is TJR. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. Today, I want to talk about autotune. This is a subject that I've maybe lightly discussed every once in a while. Perhaps when Robert and I would review an album and we heard autotune being used, we might briefly touch on this subject. But today I really kind of just want to put all the cards on the table. So first of all, I have somewhat mixed feelings about the use of autotune. I can understand using autotune if, say, maybe you've laid down a vocal track, everything sounds really good. There's one little spot here where your voice cracked. And rather than do the whole thing all over again, you're just going to go in and just kind of fix up that one little part, maybe. I can see that as maybe a time-saving tool, and I can understand that. There are other exceptions that I'll give for using autotune, which I'll talk about in a moment. But by and large, I think I would just say, go and sing it again, by and large. Also, I think that there's a lot of beauty in imperfection, and that the human voice doesn't need to be perfect. We have lots of music artists who are huge, whose voices are not necessarily technically perfect, who maybe sing nasally, who sometimes their notes go in and out of pitch to a certain degree. And I think that there's a level to where those imperfections work. There's always a point where they don't work, where you say, okay, you've got to do that again. And this part is very subjective. There's always going to be people who hate Bob Dylan's vocals. They're going to hate that nasally tone, and they just can't get past it. And that's fine. We all have our tastes. We all hear things differently when it comes to music. But I will say that I don't like the overt use of autotune, which is kind of how we hear autotune being used in most modern recordings. It's extremely overt. It creates this kind of a robotic sound to the voice. And I don't care for it. I don't care for it as an effect, and this is a personal thing. And I, again, think that there's beauty in imperfection, and there are the individual quirks of the human voice are what give it its personality and its signature. I'm not the only one who feels this way. There is a very famous rock singer that also recently talked about this. I'll be talking about her in just a moment in this video. But let me just talk about this overt use. I think that the first really massively popular mainstream pop song to use autotune in this extreme overt way was probably the song Believe by Cher, which was released in 1998. There probably were musicians who used it in an overt way. And once again, I stress overt, not a more secretive way where you're just using it to fix a vocal and you don't want people to know about it, but you're going to use it to fix it. This was the first really big mainstream hit to use that. Prior to Believe, that song, I think that there were music artists who used it secretly to fix vocal mistakes or vocal inadequacies. But in all of those cases, there was definitely an effort made to hide that it was being used. In the case of Believe, no, they wanted that effect front and center. They wanted you to notice it. They wanted you to hear it. And the thing about that track, which is, and I'll once again be very open here, never liked the song, never cared for it. I think even without the use of the autotune, I wouldn't have cared for it. I think the song is just mind-numbing, in my opinion, and not in a good way. There can be good ways to be mind-numbed, but I really just did not care for the song at all. I don't think it's terribly original sounding. I don't think it's all that interesting musically. And the autotune was just kind of the icing on the cake for me on that one, as far as not liking it. But I do have to say that the use of that effect is probably what got that song a lot of attention. And it probably played a huge hand in the success of that song. But by the time it was released, Cher had already proven that she could actually sing, that she had a real singing voice and a really good singing voice. It was just an effect, a novelty to grab the attention of listeners. Anyways, I didn't like the song then. I don't like it now, but I did recently re-listen to it as part of this video. And re-listening to it again today, it's surprising how much of Cher's natural voice was allowed to come through in that recorded performance. In other words, her voice wasn't completely 100% auto-tuned, hard auto-tuned, where you've got this intense effect on the vocal. Throughout the track, you'll hear her real voice come through as well. Now, fast forward to 2015, and I'm listening to the album No Peer Pressure by Brian Wilson, and it sounds pretty obvious that he has used auto-tune on the recordings, but not in a deliberate, overt way, in the way that a lot of modern pop tunes do now, to the point of ad nauseum. Instead, it's like he's using it just to fix a few vocal rough spots. And honestly, I don't mind this. Just like Cher, Brian Wilson, he's already proven that he can sing. And at his age, it's to be expected that he doesn't have the vocal strength he had when he was younger. And to me, it seemed clear that he was using this just as a tool to fix his rough spots. Now, you might think, well, why doesn't he just sing warts and all, even with the rough spots? It's hard to say because I couldn't hear what was there originally. Once again, there's always that point where you say, okay, this isn't good. You have to fix this one way or the other. Either you re-sing it or we're going to go in with auto-tune and fix it. But if it were me, I would think, if at all possible, try to just re-sing it. Try not to use this effect if you possibly can. Because once again, it's that personality that comes through, in my opinion, when you don't use that particular effect or that particular tool. But at the same time, I do understand that Brian Wilson has a history for, and a commitment and even obsessiveness to recording pop perfection. So I can understand why he might use it. So now, fast forward again now to 2019, Paul McCartney releases a track called Get Enough, a song that was heavily promoted in the music media as, hey everybody, look, Paul McCartney is using autotune. And he even did interviews about the release where he said, oh, if John Lennon were still alive, he'd be all over this effect. He'd want to use it. It's true that John Lennon would do things like double track his vocals because he thought it made them sound thicker. And it's a trick that a lot of recording artists have used. It's still you really singing. He also liked having effects, of course, like echo, delay, reverb. That is a common practice, both live and in studio, that you have echo and reverb. And we're going to talk about those effects in a moment. But on Get Enough, he's using it really, really overtly in the way, again, a lot of modern pop artists will do. So naturally, I didn't like this track when I heard it. But he's making no bones about it. He's using it as an overt effect. I remember the reaction from fans was fairly negative everywhere I looked. Just looking at message boards, YouTube reactions, the reaction was extremely negative. But I thought to myself, even if you remove the auto-tuning from this particular track, the actual track itself felt pretty throwaway. Definitely not an essential McCartney track. And I couldn't help but think to myself, I think, given that this is kind of just a throwaway track, I think he did this deliberately. So that in the future, if he needed to use it to smooth out his rough spots, so to speak, that audiences would be more forgiving. And they'd say, well, at least he's not using it overtly like he did in Get Enough. Also, just like Brian Wilson, Paul McCartney has been known to be very obsessive at times regarding pop perfection. It's one of the things that we love about him. It's one of the things we love about Brian Wilson. And if he needs to smooth out his rough spots in his older age, who am I to judge? He's not a young man anymore. I say, fine, just use it only when you really need to. Now, oddly enough, when he released his next album, which was McCartney 3, he stood vocally naked on that album. And he allowed the age of his voice to come through, the roughness of his voice. Now that he's in his golden years, he allowed all of that to come through on the recordings. And, you know, he received a lot of criticism online from fans who didn't like how rough and old his voice sounded. You know, I don't want to hear him like this, people would say. I want to hear him when he was young and his voice was, you know, at its peak. And I personally applauded him for standing there vocally naked on the album. It's one of the things that I liked about that album, that he, as far as I can tell, didn't use any auto-tune, because you hear all the roughness in his voice. I applauded that. It's, like I said, it's one of the things I really liked about the album. This brings me to 2020. And Ozzy Osbourne releases his 12th studio album, Ordinary Man. Just like with Brian Wilson on the album No Peer Pressure, it does definitely feel at times like he's using auto-tune to help him through his rough spots. And again, that's fine. I remember giving the album a positive review on the channel. This brings me to 2022 and Ozzy Osbourne's new song, an advanced track for his next album entitled Patient Number 9, a track featuring Jeff Beck, and a track that also features really overt use of autotune, more than I've heard before. A lot more than just Ordinary Man. Now, I listened to the track, and in spite of the autotune, I think it's a really good track. Jeff Beck plays this very cool earworm guitar riff, but like Get Enough, the blatant use of the autotune does bug me. I still like the track. The riffs are too cool to not like it. And, you know, what do you expect from Jeff Beck? And also, somehow, even with the use of the autotune rather overtly, it still managed to sound like Ozzy. So I thought to myself, I really hope this is just an effect he's going for on just this one track versus being what we should expect on the rest of the album. I really do hope that. But as I ask this, I also have to be self-critical. It's very easy for people in my age range to reject the new and only want to embrace the old. You know, am I just an old man yelling at the cloud with this? I mean, I am a guitarist, and we guitarists, we use effects all the time, myself included. We use reverb, delay, distortion, overdrive, phase shifters, choruses, flangers, wah pedals, pitch shifters. I have used all of these to varying degrees on recordings. So why do I think it's okay for me and every other guitarist on the planet to use guitar effects and not vocalists? And actually, I'm a vocalist too. And like most people who've recorded, I use effects on my voice. So have other musicians. We all use, you know, a little bit of reverb here and there, maybe even more reverb, delays, echoes, choruses. Sometimes if we're going for an extreme effect, we might throw on a phase shifter because we want to go for a certain effect for a particular song. We use those on our vocals as easily as we use them on our guitars. But it doesn't bother me to use them, and it doesn't bother me to hear other musicians use them. So isn't autotune just another effect? Really? And why should I be bothered by it? And I know I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people are. So here's the one difference that I can point out. All of those effects I just mentioned, distortion, delay, overdrive, chorus, flangers, phase shifters, wah pedals, pitch shifters, all of those effects I've just named off, none of those effects are going to fix me if I hit a bad note. At the end of the day, I still have to know how to play my instrument. And the same goes for all those effects we use on vocals. I still have to know how to play my instrument. The voice is an instrument too, and you have to know how to use that instrument. But autotune sends a message that you don't really have to know how to use that instrument. This brings me to Ann Wilson. There was a recent interview with her on the Josta Show YouTube channel, and I recommend you go watch that video. And in that, she stated, "It is natural flaws and imperfections that make a voice memorable and affecting. I think the little rough places or the little out-of-tune soulful quirks about your vocals are the thing that makes it sound like you, like a human." She went on to say, "When everything's all tuned to A440 exactly and robotic and everything, it's just like being anonymous. You just kind of fall into this robotic way of sounding. You sound exactly like everybody else." And this sums up perfectly why I don't like it. Ann Wilson is one of the most powerful and dynamic singers of the classic rock era. But not every singer of her era was necessarily a great powerhouse vocalist like her. Some of them, technically speaking, were just okay, but it was all in their personality and how they delivered the song's vocals that made them great. We're telling a generation, no, you don't have to know how to sing if you want a music career. We've got this little thing called autotune, and you can use that, and we'll have some producers write some songs for you. But more importantly, I think we're losing personality. We're losing unique musical personalities as a result of this. Now, before I end this on a real downer note, I do want to state that there are tons of new artists who don't use autotune, who keep it real. They may not always get the traction that this more synthetic recorded music gets when it comes to radio airplay, charting on streaming services. They may not get that level of traction, but they're definitely out there. So show your support. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Please leave your comments. As always, if you like what I do here, be sure to click like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. And a big thank you goes out to my patron supporters who are helping me make more videos. If you'd like to show your support for this channel and become a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR the original. Make a monthly pledge of whatever you can afford. If you can't afford to become a patron supporter, that's okay. You can show your support for this channel by clicking like and playing all of these videos to the very end. That really helps a great deal. It also helps the YouTube algorithm to recognize this channel and recommend these videos to more people. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'll look forward to hearing what you have to say about this topic, and I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Take care. Bye-bye.